listeners and friends of the festival. Welcome to Offscreen with OFFA. I'm your host, Maddie, and I'm so excited to present our second podcast episode, an interview with Canadian writer-director Vanya Rose. Vanya joins me from the Montreal area to discuss her film Woman in Car, a scintillating drama based on Edith Wharton's novel The Reef, which is having its Oakville premiere at this year's 2021 festival. Woman in Car is set in the wealthy suburbs of Montreal and follows Anne, played by Helen Joy, an ex-Olympic archer turned widowed trophy wife. Anne struggles to maintain her seemingly perfect high-class existence despite both her past and complicated family ties resurfacing before her wedding. If you enjoy this podcast, please follow Woman in Car, the film, on Facebook and Instagram, and look into screening the film at OFFA.ca. We hope you enjoy this sneak peek behind the scenes of this amazing film. Welcome, Vanya, to Offscreen with OFFA, and thank you so much for joining us this morning on the eve of the festival. We are starting tomorrow. I'm so excited to talk to you about Woman in Car. That's interesting to hear that it was more inspired by the novel than intentionally being an adaptation, and that you intentionally put that little bit of distance.
Well, originally it was actually more similar. I have to say, it started off quite close to an adaptation. And then just as time went by and, waiting for financing happened, I just kind of went into a whole other universe. So originally it was a period film. Originally it was very close to the book, and then it became contemporary. And then I just totally went into a different headspace at the time. And so, it totally changed.
Amazing. So what was sort of the thrust behind that transition to a more contemporary setting, and specifically Montreal as well, which is really an interesting choice, and also, that process of finding something unique in this that's a little bit separate from, a straight up period adaptation. What was that process, and what drew you to this specific story and working with the sort of the tension and drama and overlapping of characters that exists in Wharton's novels?
Ooh, it's a lot of questions in one. I wish I could think with all that. So I would say what attracted me to the novel to begin with, it's an incredible novel. And in fact, the gentleman who very briefly wrote me from the Edith Wharton house, who kind of are in charge of all of Wharton's, her estate, and have all of her books and everything there, her furniture, and he said it's his favorite novel of hers. And it's funny because it's one of her least read novels, and in fact when it was originally published it was returned. A lot of people returned the novel. It wasn't very well received as much as her other ones, because I think it was very, very contemporary for the time. The novel is basically built on a couple who's about to get married when the woman finds out her fiance has had an affair. Now, an affair, it's a strange thing because they're not officially engaged when he has the affair. They're kind of just starting to court each other, turn the century kind of stuff. And he ends up having an affair with a younger woman that he meets on a trip, and but it kind of lingers in him. And then the woman returns. This young woman returns in their life. And the woman, the protagonist, Anne, who has the same name as the main character in our film, has to deal with this affair. And the novel is set up so that each chapter is one of the couple's point of views. So you have one chapter when it's her point of view, and then it's his point of view on this affair. It was so contemporary. And of course, they never actually talk about the act. It's always like, and they walked into the room, and they disappeared into the room at night. And so they never actually say, he had an affair, but, they don't actually show, any scenes of an affair. But the whole book is structured on these two points of view, a man and a woman, and how this man and this woman deal with the affair. And it just keeps going back and forth and back and forth. And it's very stressful. It's a very stressful novel to read, but at the same time, it's totally, just totally contemporary. I mean, I've never read anything like that from that period. So that's what attracted me to it, and maybe it to me, in that it was just, I just found it mind-blowing how it was written. Having read a lot from that period, it's kind of my favorite period, the turn of the century literature. And then in terms of just how it ensued, I mean, I don't really know. I think that I just began to just want to speak about the present a little bit. I just wasn't, it's funny, I'm working on a project now that's period, but because I'm very interested in historical fiction and how we deal with history and fiction and how we, tend to either romanticize it or, so I try to kind of stay away from that romanticism that we have with the past, and how do we show that in terms of film and image. And but anyway, but then I just decided that, and also to simplify things, I felt like it was a lot for it's my first feature film. So even though I'd done shorts that were period, I just felt like for my first feature it might be simpler just to keep it a contemporary film. So there was a bunch of kind of practical reasons also, but then I just became just really attracted in doing something about the now. And I just felt like there was a nice, Wharton came from a very wealthy, group in New York. She'd been raised in that and gone back and forth between Europe and New York. And I just found a great comparison with, Westmount in Montreal, this kind of, very upper, middle, upper kind of group. And so I just kind of went from there and just, and then just started kind of, going with just my instincts on like the stepson and what that was all about, because there was all these weird references to him in the novel, and I just couldn't put my finger on why the stepson was such an odd character in the novel. So then I kind of took that to the next level, and yeah. And so then I just, creation is a very strange thing. It's very hard to break down creation because it's such a instinctive and just kind of, you just kind of have to go with the flow with creation. So it's hard to explain, I guess, when and where and how it all happens,
No, absolutely. But I think it's still fascinating to hear that it was very much a gut instinct for you, and it sort of came about with your own intuition and ways that you could kind of pull similarities out from the novel and contemporary Canadian life, which is so interesting that you can find those areas of overlap. But I think it is a very fundamentally human piece. Like there's so much going on, and it's so driven by this sort of anxiety and tension and repression, right? Like there's a lot of repressed desire, there's repressed emotion, repressed anguish that the characters experience. And
I think Wharton was amazing with that. I mean, Wharton really, she didn't have children, so she had a lot of time on her hands compared to most women at that time, and she was basically a genius. I mean, she is a genius, and she really investigated her culture at that time, which I think, issues of money, linger today. Obviously, it's not a dead subject by far. It's just changed kind of from, this kind of social level of structure to, these gigantic, Amazon type people who, own, half the world. But we still have these major issues with wealth and class that are very much a part of our lives, and that permeate it and that cause a lot of problems, So it hasn't changed. That hasn't changed at all.
No, yes, it's very interesting to see those areas of consistency, and also interesting to see how you played with that tension that Wharton does bring sort of to the table and so eloquently to the screen, and the sort of the decisions that you made around Anna's character, and particularly with regards to, I mean, in general, there's a very slow reveal about these characters, but I'd say with her character in particular, everything is shown so visually, once again with that repressed element, right? Like she has this preoccupation with archery, and it's as though the tension within herself is almost demonstrated within the tension of the bow. And I just felt that was such an interesting decision, and I'm wondering what went into those choices around how to demonstrate that visually.
Well, the archery per se, you mean? Like in terms of the choice with the archery?
The archery, the hunting aspect, that really visceral scene where she's skinning the rabbit, that was tough. But
Varying crew members.
You definitely feel a certain sense of something is not being said, and that's consistent throughout the whole film, is there's consistently something not being said, and that's what makes it so exciting and draws you in. But again, I'm wondering, what was behind the decision to do that? How did you kind of come to that decision? Is it something you felt was inherent in Wharton's novel at all?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Anne in the novel had definitely a tension within herself. I mean, just trying to survive, trying to survive in her given social structure, and how to deal with this, with the affair. So that was definitely causing her a lot of stress. I mean, in terms of how to pretend, there's a lot of pretense, and I think Wharton deals with that incredibly. I mean, if you watch Scorsese's Age of Innocence, you can see it there too. Just people trying to keep up a pretense, which is full of tension just automatically. But in terms of the archery, I mean, I joke around that I'm a Sagittarius, but it's a sport that I find fascinating for many reasons. I don't do archery, by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just always something that's interested me since I was very young. But it was interesting because I started researching. I started researching it before that film. What's it called? The famous, the one with archery, the Hunger? No, what's it called? Hunger?
The Hunger Games? Yes.
Yeah, so it was funny because it hadn't come out yet when I started researching archery. And then it came out, and so we had all these great shots of posters. It was so funny. These huge Hunger Game posters with bows and arrows. It was hilarious. Anyway, so it was funny timing. So when I started researching it, it was like years ago, and I went to, I found this girl who ends up being in the film. She's the one who plays the young archer that we see at the end of the film, Virginie Chenier. And she's she's one of our great kind of Quebec archers. And so she was quite young when I first met her. And it's just, these people are incredible athletes, in that the strength that's needed is insane to begin with, which we don't even realize, because you think, oh, archery, how much strength do you need? But these women are incredibly strong women. And then they have this incredible skill, which golfers supposedly have too, which is the ability to it's a part of the brain that's uber developed, and it's the ability to see a point very far in the distance and kind of just, aim for it and actually get to it, which is a very hard skill to have. And when you go there and you watch them practice, you have no clue how they're seeing where they're aiming to. Like, you have no clue, like you cannot see that point at all. So, it's this incredible part of the brain, but it creates, these people who have this skill, it's a type of personality, they really develop a type of personality that's very, I don't even know what you call that type of personality. They're very, driven for sure as athletes, but they have a very strong skill that keeps them very focused as humans, and so when you speak to them, you really get a different sense with these people. Very, quiet yet contained personalities. So already the archer itself, I find, is an interesting character just in and of itself, the archer as a personality type, because it takes a very specific personality to sit there and just want to aim over and over and over again to do that. So that was fascinating. And then there's the fact that it is originally it was a weapon, and it still is a weapon, so then there's that threat that comes from that, and this desire to kind of aim at something, and what are we aiming at, and what are we aiming for, and all of that. When we were when we were applying for financing, I got some comment like, oh, this is a film about the Amazonian woman, and I'm like, what? It was the furthest thing from my mind. Like, I hadn't even thought of like the Amazonian woman. Like, it was like not even in my, frame of reference when I was writing. So, the guy who commented on my film when he was reading it and thought he understood it all, didn't. But anyway, as they do when they, read your film and try to analyze it. Sorry, I'm rambling. So that was
not at all. I think it's definitely, and perhaps I made the mistake of reading into it too much, but I think it's very interesting that you say that there's specific personality type associated with the archer. I think, tell me more about how that manifested in your portrayal of Anne and how.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And how Helen Joy brought it to the table. I mean, such an excellent performance from her, like just absolutely solid.
Yeah, every time I watch it, it's like ridiculous. Every time I watch it, I'm just blown away by her performance every time. It's so funny. Yeah, she was with the project from the very beginning, like before it had even transformed into, anything. Because we'd met when I was still at CFC, and we just clicked, and then we did a short together, and then continued on to do this. So she was kind of in it from the beginning when it wasn't even, I hadn't even written the script yet. And, but I had this idea of a character, and I just, so I kind of wrote it, always with Helene in mind, which is actually how I like to write. And Leanne was also very much in my mind when I wrote the part for Sophia. I really like to choose my actors before I even write. I realize, like, I'm working on this project now, and it's really something that I really enjoy, because I find that it really allows me to be inspired, but not in terms of their personality types, because they're very different. Helene couldn't be more different than Anne. And Leanne couldn't be more different than Sophia. But it's almost fun to write characters that are almost the opposite of the actor in some way, because you just can imagine how much fun they're going to have transforming into them. So there's something, I think it's just nice to have an actor in mind for physical reasons, like just physically you can see them and feel them when you write. So that's just nice to, it kind of gives you that kind of extra oomph when you're writing. And the other thing about Anne, that being an athlete, which I think was really essential for the story, is that, I heard a bunch of interviews with athletes, Olympic athletes, Canadian Olympic athletes, and just hearing their story, and then actually the owner of the store, who we ended up using for the archery store at the opening of the film, and who lent us a lot of equipment, and who was great. His story was incredible too, but just, these athletes are like artists. They really are, in that they don't have any money. They're living off of very little. They get an amount from the government, to survive if they're joining the Olympic team or whatever. And it's so little, and it all goes into their equipment and into their, trainers, and into so a lot of them live with their parents. A lot of them are, they're like artists. They have a true passion, and they are, finding any way to survive. They have 3 jobs. They, it's incredible, the stories you hear. And so that's fascinating to me, how this woman, she came from nothing, how she ended up in that situation, right? Like, how do you end up in that situation where you're married to a man, as a young woman, you end up with an older man and who has money, and, what is that about, right? And so that was basically how it came about. Also, the idea of the athlete was that I wanted her to come from something that she had to leave behind, for whatever reason she did. We know the reasons why, but she left that world behind in order, and just gave it up and moved on, and just found financial and material, support and stability. So I think the athlete aspect of Anne is even more important almost than the archery. It could have been maybe any sport, to be honest. Just that archery interested me for all those other reasons, but just the idea of the artist, and the athlete, aka the artist in general, who sacrifices their passion for something else.
Yes. No, that definitely speaks to the layers to these characters, for sure.
And Helene was like every day, man. That was like, it was incredible, because Helene had to every day kind of enter into this. Helene was a very kind of jubilant, happy person in real life, to the end, had to enter into this kind of like structure every day. She'd have to walk on set for her by the end. Thank God it wasn't that long or shoot, but dealing with all those different pressures, having to remind yourself every day of all those pressures you're dealing with is a lot, because as an actor, you have to sit there and kind of just, break it down. And just so every day she had to enter into that, so it was an amazing feat for her, having gone from, she works a lot on Murdoch Mysteries, a Canadian show, which, has lots of background stuff. I don't know the show that well, but I think it was a lot, for day after day to have to enter into that character for Helene. So she really pulled it off,
Oh, she absolutely did.
So,
And
yeah.
I mean, the performance as well of Aidan Ritchie.
Mhm.
Talk to me a little bit about that and that casting process, because that's a very unique role as well. And he played it so brilliantly. I think, it was such a great, although each of these characters are interestingly somewhat insular and are experiencing their own interior struggles, they perform so excellently as an ensemble.
Yeah, we worked a lot. We had to work a lot on Skype because everyone was, we were all over the place. No one was in the same city, none of us. So we had these like Skype rehearsals for months before, because I'm really big on rehearsals. I come from a theater background and I was an actor when I was younger and stuff. And so rehearsals for me are really key. I know some directors don't like rehearsing and stuff, or just don't have the time, or the actors don't have the time because they're working on other stuff. But we really made a point of, really, and which I do for all my projects, but we really made a point of, rehearsing online a lot, talking a lot of backstory, old school, just theater stuff, old Stanislavski, man, just, just making a point of really working the characters. So yeah, I think it really paid off in terms of their, when they got on set, they really were able to already relate to each other, like on a deeper level. But Aidan, you were talking about Aidan.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he did such a fantastic job. And that character is also deeply layered, and I mean has some real trauma that he's experienced, and
yeah,
experiences also a great deal of loss throughout the film, and I won't spoil that either, but again, a performance that really shined through. And I'm curious what the casting process was for him.
This is a very funny story, actually. So I was kind of like desperate at this point because we were only a few months away from shooting and I still hadn't cast him. And I had kind of reached out to a lot of agents, and I do all my own casting. I never hire a casting agent for every role, like every single role I guess. And so just because I don't know, that's just how also I have no money. So it's like, I just like, what am I going to do? Like hire, I'd rather put the money into the film. And I mean, that is putting it into the film, but I just don't have the money for so I just do it all myself. But also I just enjoy it, to be honest. Like, it's just how I work. So I'm not going to question it at this point. So anyway, so I'd reached out to a bunch of, agents and everyone. I was getting all these big names, people who, were doing their films in Hollywood by now and all these great actors. But no one, the fact is that I have to really, as a director, really, really feel a connection to my actors. I just, for whatever reason, and it's kind of like at this point, I just, once again, it's stuff you don't really think about or question. You just have to go with your instincts and trust them at one point. And so I just looked at all these actors and I looked at their reels, and they were all lovely people, and they all had, done amazing work and, worked hard and, done lots of projects. And, but I didn't feel that instinctive attraction, which you have to feel as a director, be it a woman or a man, if you're straight or gay or whatever it is, you have to feel an attraction to this person to want to work with this person, as a great, Peter Sellers, the theater director, once said, you're going to have, you have to want to have dinner with these people, like meaning like you have to want to sit down and actually spend time with these people to work with them, It's not just about, can they, are they good actors? It's also, do you want to be with this person, and create with them? Because creation is a very intimate experience.
Absolutely.
And, we talk about film and kind of the industry, but creation is a very intimate experience. And you're creating this thing, this film, and the energy that has to go in that, it has to be a symbiosis between all of you, or else it doesn't work, and you can feel it in a film when it doesn't work. I think so. You have what you end up having a lot of, and I think because a lot of directors aren't good with actors, they don't really know how to direct actors. But what you end up having is, that's just sad, and that's just how it is. You have actor coaches on set, directing the actors, and then the director kind of comes in. But what you end up having is performances that go in all directions. Whereas what you want is to have a cohesive feeling for all your actors, so that all your actors come from the same universe and live within the same universe, right? So sometimes you watch films, you can't quite put your finger on why everyone feels like they're going in all directions. So all to say, I couldn't find an actor, really going on. I couldn't find an actor that I felt that with. And so one day I hurt my back. So this was right before Christmas. So this was Christmas time and I hurt my back. I don't know, I hurt my back. I was like, carrying a baby around and whatever, a kid around. And so I literally had to lie in bed like every day for like 3-4 hours because I just was like in pain. And so my kid was sleeping, napping. And I said, okay, I have literally 3-4 hours. I am going to, and I was desperate because we were shooting in March and it was now Christmas. So I had like 3 months. I'm going to lie here for like 3-4 hours and I'm going to go through the casting workbook, which is this kind of like casting website that you can use. And I'm going to find Owen today. It was like, I just said it like that. All these people. And so I literally had to go through like hundreds and hundreds of pages because it was like, I don't know, 40, 50 pictures on each page. So it was about 3.5 hours in of doing this when I got to R, hence Aiden Ritchie.
Oh my goodness.
So I got to about 3.5 hours into this and I fall on this little picture, much like how I found Helene actually, because I didn't know who Helen Joy was when I found her either. She was once again a little picture of this. So this little tiny picture of this guy and I was like, I was like, who's this guy? And so he was in Winnipeg. He hadn't done that much stuff. He'd done a bunch of random stuff. There was something about music that I think I read in his CV thing, in his resume. And since he had to be musical, I thought, well, he didn't have to be musical, but I thought it'd be a nice bonus. And then I just kind of did what I do. I just kind of stalked him a little bit. So I just kind of went on Facebook and I went on maybe Instagram. I can't remember if we was looking at that time, but I definitely saw him on Facebook. And so I just kind of checked him out. I saw him playing guitar. So he was this really talented singer, guitarist. And then I watched a few, like maybe a second or two of his videos, but I always have this thing, I don't want to watch them do their acting because I'm scared I'm going to get that in my head before I see them, And I just said, and I literally texted my friend. I remember this, my friend was texting me about something and she was texting me and I said, I just found Owen. I swear to God. And she's like, what? I'm like, I just found Owen. I swear to God, he's in Winnipeg and he's like barely done anything, but I found him. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm positive. It was the most funny thing. I know, but I couldn't really meet him, so it was like kind of this awkward situation where I was just like, okay, just put yourself on tape. I'm going to send you a scene. And so he was like, okay, sure. So actually I was here. I'd just come to the country because it was the Christmas holiday and I'd come to the country and I get this in my inbox and I'm like, please let it be good. I remember I was just like, please let it be good. And so I remember I was upstairs and I pressed play and I literally watched, I had one eye open. I was like this. And I watched 3 seconds of it. And I was like, it's him. I was done. I was
my goodness.
I watched literally 3 seconds. He said hi. I was like, done. I was like, it's him. It's perfect. And then I had to watch the rest when I was so nervous. So then I waited the entire day and then I watched it finally, but I knew it was him already. And so, but his biggest talent is his instincts. He's really strong with his instincts. And so, despite having to, he has no formal training. So you have to kind of guide him on some things. And I think that's the most important thing with an actor is just that their instincts are good, because then you can just kind of hone them a little bit. But if they don't have their instincts and if they're not passionate, like Aiden is just a uber passionate human being on every, even in his real life, in his life, he's just the real deal. You don't find, I think, that many artists these days. People are so professional and, kudos to people who have good professional lives. But he's kind of beyond that. He's kind of reminds me of, old school actors where it's just, he's a real artist, he really believes.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really believes in being, true to art and to that whole lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, clearly through this conversation, it seems as though you're someone who also works from their intuition and from, their instincts as well. And I think this has been such a great combination of people who clearly can use that and allow it to manifest in something that definitely totally took my breath away. I mean, I was completely just in my seat, zoned in the entire time. And as much as it is such a subtle emotional journey, it in a weird way, it's a wild ride because there's so much going on and such great performances, so great. And in terms of the, just kind of going off your point about the collaboration with those actors, what are some of the tips that you would maybe recommend to other filmmakers about, managing the collaboration with actors, and how do you approach that that collaborative effort?
Well, I don't know if I'm one for tips. I'm a terrible teacher on all levels. I discovered that. You have to love it, you have to just really love what everyone probably says this, right? Like, you have to love what you're doing, but you have to just, when you're directing, if you're not comfortable directing, aka, being with actors, I think that is what scares me about directing to directors. Just generally today, what I see kind of going on, because I was an actor, so I worked on many films before. I was always directing theater, but then kind of I made money by directing, really small little parts, whatever, in film. And no director ever spoke to me.
Wow.
Never. They said, okay, go left, go right. Okay. And actually, I felt like sometimes even, and I worked with a few big directors, and I literally felt like they were avoiding me, actually, most of the time. Like, I feel like they were avoiding just kind of all actors. They were happy talking to their technical team and their DP and their sound guy and their, but I felt like most directors kind of avoided actors, and the actors were just starving to talk to their director. They were just like waiting to talk to the director, like, where's my director? And the director's like, oh, I'm busy, I'm over here. And the assistant director would come over, whatever, and kind of deal with the actor. And so I feel like there's kind of this, I think, historically there's been directors who are better with actors and others who aren't. But I just feel like, if you want a film to, unless your film's like a big budget thing and you have a lot of stuff distracting you, or if your film's very formal and, you want people to focus on your shots and, the image and, which are beautiful, some of my favorite films are like that. And so, there are other great parts of film that exist that aren't to do with actors. But I do feel like for myself as a director, I realize more and more, because when I first started making film, I was so into like image, because I just was thirsty for image, because I'm also a visual artist. And so I was just so happy to be doing visual again after theater for so long. So I was like totally into my frame and my storyboards but as I'm getting older and as I'm really figuring out what I really love, I really enjoy that process with the actors most of all of anything. And it's the most, for me, it's the most important relationship, apart from my DP. My DP was kind of like not even a separate being for me. It's like kind of like we're the same person. So it doesn't even feel like a relationship. It kind of just feels like it's me and me at this point. With the actors, it's really, it's just important that I think as a director that you just enjoy doing it. And if you don't enjoy directing, you shouldn't be doing it. If it doesn't feel like that's your place on set, it could be another place on set. But, or in storytelling in general, or, you could be a writer, you could be an editor, you could be, but you find yourself directing. But you have to really love your actors, I think. I just love them, and it's just like, it has to feel like these people, they're the ones telling your story, they're like your children, but it's not even like your children. It's like at another level. It's, it's,
there's certainly a certain degree of trust, I think, that you have to be able to place in the actors, and that's such a huge part of it. And clearly that's really at the core of the collaboration that you guys have been able to build, is that element of trust.
Yeah, I definitely think trust is a big thing. And even like, trust is an interesting thing, because at the same time, it's almost like I don't know how much I trust them. Like, in the sense that, like, it's almost like I want them to kind of do something that's not right sometimes, and to almost mess me up and then mess themselves up. And then we have to like, I don't know how much I trust them. I just trust that they want to do something great,
Yeah.
They just want to, like, they just want to make this the best fucking film, you know? And it doesn't have to be like, okay, I told you to go left, so make sure you go left, you know? Like, I don't necessarily like actors that are good students, you know what I mean? And that I feel like safe with. You know? Helene and I remember that scene in the garage between Aiden and Helene in the garage. The time, we didn't realize we had to get out of there earlier because we were in Westmount and we had to leave earlier that day. And anyway, we had like an hour less than I had planned, or even more, like less. And so it was a very stressful scene to do. And it was a scene that was like super important to me. And it was the first scene when we finished shooting. I went home and I literally just edited the whole scene. And the edit hasn't changed, basically. Like, I went home and I was so worried that it didn't work that I went home and I literally just, like, as soon as I got the footage, I just edited it all, and just to make sure I had it, and I had it. And I was happy, but like I couldn't sleep because I was just like, I didn't get it. And but that scene was super stressful, you know, because we were in this garage and we had to get it, and we had so little time, and well, what seemed like, you know, when I say like 4 hours, it sounds like so much time, but it wasn't much time. It was only 3 hours. And, you know, Helene at one point, you know, we had this like kind of screaming match where we're like in real life, you know, as humans, you know, actor and director, we're just kind of screaming at each other. And, you know, I see it because I'm, you know, but then it took us to the next level, you know. Helene couldn't get there, and then she did get there, you know, and it was about a lack of trust. There was something going on where she didn't believe what I was saying, and I didn't believe what she was saying. And then we just kind of screamed it out, and then it was over. And she kind of, actually, I think the screaming kind of got her to the next level, and then she was able to get there, you know. But so I don't know if it's trust or it's just like this desire, like a desire, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least being on track for the same goal and knowing that you're on track for the same goal, regardless if, you know, that process of creation and ideation is sometimes sparks fly.
Yeah.
Yes, man. I mean, so interesting to hear about your creative process and how you put this film together. I mean, such an impressive feat, and an impressive feat for your actors as well. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I mean, such a pleasure speaking with you, Vanya, and so many great insights. I'm so excited for people to see this film. So please, everyone, go get your tickets, check it out. And thank you so much, Vanya.
Thank you.
This podcast is executive produced by Maddie Kaiser and Wendy Donnan. The music is by Chris Shin. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and tune in next time.